With all the corporate relocation we see in Houston, we constantly see people moving in and out of real estate. Nationally, we expect that average to be about 7 years that someone sits in a home, and realistically here in Houston, it's pretty common to see people sell after 3 or 4 years. But even with that in mind, I started to notice a trend. An unusually large number of pandemic-era homes built, say, between 2021 and 2023 were back on the market. And here we're going to cover why. Hi, I'm Carolyn Bauerschlag, a local real estate agent right here in West Houston, helping people just like you relocate from all over the country right to our great city. Travel back in time with me to fall of 2020. We were 6 months post-pandemic shutdown, and people were starting to get a little stir-crazy, but also starting to feel a little bit more confident. Maybe that house that you were in felt too small, and people started to really move. Interest rates were 3%, and that demand really started to kick up by September-ish of that year. Fast forward to January of 21, and interest rates fell even further to 2.65%. Resale was absolutely nuts. People would stand at doors and literally get in fistfights over the lockbox. There were 40-person lines outside of these houses. You had to wait hours to get in. You had to get on waiting lists with builders to even have a chance at writing a contract. It was literally nuts, and builders knew it. And looking back, this is precisely where I can say, this is where things started to fall apart. If you've bought a house with a loan before, you know how this goes. A builder pre-approves you off of what they think that you can afford with your monthly payment. They look at all of your monthly income and stack up your monthly debt, and they calculate an amount that you are allowed to pay for a house. Now, with record low interest rates, what that means is that people could afford more house, which what builders heard was, let's improve the prices so that everyone has more debt. What that turned into very quickly is that people were justifying taking on way more debt than they would have otherwise on account of their monthly payment being low. And still in 2021, insurance hadn't spiraled out of control yet. For a new construction home, you could still confidently get a decent policy for somewhere around $2,000 for the year. Now here's the kicker: property taxes. If you are buying with a builder's lender, it is at the builder's lender's discretion to decide how they're going to account for property taxes. Now remember, in a normal loan for most people, their monthly payment is comprised of principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Now, if you're a builder's lender, what you're required to do is go off of certified values for a property. Certified values in English means they pull last year's tax bill from the county's records. Well, guess what? Last year in a new construction community, the tax bill was on dirt, right? So these builders lenders would pull up a tax bill for your home and say, look, the tax bill for the year is $500, and they would prorate the property taxes for next year off of $500. But anyone who was paying attention knew that that was a problem. The property tax bill for the property and a completed home was going to be at least $8,000, $9,000, $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 for this completed property. The right thing to have done with these builders lenders would have been to prorate property taxes based off of next year's bill. And even if they weren't going to prorate property taxes off of next year's values, at a minimum, what they should have done is make sure that your monthly payment was including what your responsibility would be at the end of the year. Put differently, the way that builders were doing it, your monthly payment might have looked like it was going to be $2,500 a month, when in fact, when those property tax bills came out with a completed house on it, your bill was actually going to be $3,500 a month. And it gets worse. Yours truly was involved in transactions where I witnessed this firsthand. We went to both the title company and the builder's lender and said, hey, please do us a solid and make sure that this buyer doesn't get spanked with a larger bill later down the road. And they still wouldn't do it. And we said, okay, fine, at least improve or increase their monthly payment that they're making every single month so that they don't have to come up with cash at the end of the year that they won't have remembered to save. And they still said no. I hate to be a cynic, but this was most prevalent when it was the builder's lender and the builder's title company calling the shots. Unfortunately, they had a vested interest in pushing as many deals through at the behest of the builder, even if that meant that in a year or two, that buyer was going to be out of a house. I pleaded with my own clients to save the additional $800 to $1,000 that the title company and the mortgage company weren't making them do, and some of them did, and some of them forgot. Now, some of y'all may know a little bit more about real estate in Texas, but in case you don't, Texas is a non-disclosure state. So in English, what that means is that when you buy a home, no one is supposed to know what you paid for that house, including the taxing authority that's giving you the property tax bill. So a natural question that we get is, well, how do they even know what my house is worth? Well, here's the thing. If you're buying a house with a mortgage, that mortgage is recorded at the county. It's called a deed of trust. That deed of trust gets recorded at the county with the amount that you borrowed on the day that you bought. So the county looks at the total debt that you've assumed and they say, well, that property is worth at least that value, and bam, you have a tax bill for the next year for at least that amount. Fast forward to 2024 and I start getting phone calls from people that I didn't really represent on the buy side, but now need my help to sell. And these stories really kind of broke my heart, right? I had people calling and saying, hey, my payment went up by $800, $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 in a single year, and they were terrified. And you can understand why. They didn't understand the escrow table that they were looking at. They believed that they were approved for this home in the example of $2,500 a month, when in fact it always needed to be $3,500 a month to make up for those future property taxes. The real kicker is that once you have an escrow shortage, that mortgage company says you need to make up for what we already paid on your behalf, and we're going to accrue more money for your future payments that are increased. So people get hit doubly hard whenever these shortages occur. Combine those property tax issues with an increasing risk environment where all of our insurance premiums went up by almost double in 4 to 5 years, and you really have a perfect storm. And I don't know about you, but I don't know a whole terrible ton of people that can just take an $800, $1,000, or $1,200 bill right on the chin every single month for an entire year. And even if they can, who wants to? This is just irresponsibility on the builder's, lender, and title company's part. And finally, to lend legitimacy to my theory, DR Horton just got hit with a class action lawsuit out of Florida for exactly this. It's kind of wild to hear RICO and home builder brought up in the same sentence, but these builders are being brought up on corruption, racketeering. Time will tell how this shakes out, but either way, I want you to know that if you're thinking about buying on the West Side, I do have your best interests at heart. If you're considering Katy, Richmond, or Cypress, I would love to be your realtor. I'm a living, breathing person right here in your backyard and ready to take your call. And if you found value in this video here today, make sure to click the link below and subscribe. We put content like this out every single week. See you soon.